Today on the show, we're going to be going over some of the must-read titles from Grant Morrison. So last year, Multiversity by Grant Morrison came out, and lots of newer people to comics knew that I was a huge fan of Grant Morrison, and they all came to me saying, what should I read by Grant Morrison? I really like this Multiversity thing. What else should I read by him? And I could never really answer that question because Grant Morrison has done so many different things. Grant Morrison is an amazing writer, but I don't want to stand here telling you, you should read this, it is good, you can get it here. Instead, I'm going to give you a brief version of Grant Morrison's publication history, looking at some of his highlights through the years. What I will say is this is not all of his titles. He's done a lot more than what I cover in this video. To begin, we're in the 1980s, a time with big ideas, big hair, and Casio keyboards. So in the early 1980s, Grant Morrison did write comics, but it wasn't his primary job. He was actually in a band called the Mixers. However, he did occasionally write Star Blazer comics, and he also wrote Doctor Who strips for Marvel UK. But like I said, this was kind of infrequent because his main job was with his band. However, his first ongoing run was at 2000 AD, at which point he caught DC Comics' attention and he pitched Animal Man, and this changed the face of comics forever. This change wasn't from Grant Morrison alone though. Grant Morrison was part of something that was called the British invasion of American comics. Basically, what happened was a lot of writers from the UK suddenly started writing for DC. This included Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Peter Milligan, and Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison was then given the Doom Patrol. Now, this was a direct contrast to Animal Man. You see, Animal Man wasn't really a well-known character at this time. Like, people kind of knew about Animal Man, but they didn't know him that well. Whereas the Doom Patrol, thousands of people were fans of this team, if not hundreds of thousands. Grant Morrison essentially took the Doom Patrol and turned it on its head. He knew the Doom Patrol was supposed to be the world's weirdest heroes or the world's strangest heroes, so he did exactly that. But it goes even deeper than that when you find out about how Grant Morrison writes. He took people that he interacted with and things that were going on in his life and put it into the comic books. But if you know his run on the Doom Patrol, you know it is incredibly strange. It's considered one of the strangest runs on comics of all time. Grant Morrison was traveling the world at this time, but he was meeting incredibly strange people and doing things that were just out of this world. He was going to fetish clubs, trying magic mushrooms, and then he would interact with people like women who would create fantastic paintings or sculptures, but would then cry all night afterwards. This was a very, very strange time in Grant Morrison's life, and this is very much reflected on his run in the Doom Patrol. But aside from that, his run in the Doom Patrol has so many esoteric messages in it and really opens your mind to the world around you. It's a really fantastic run in comics, and I recommend it for everyone. Now we're in the 1990s, and this started with a bang for Grant Morrison as he wrote Batman Legends of the Dark Knight's Gothic story arc, which is a really, really good story arc. Then DC decided to open its Vertigo imprint just as Grant Morrison finished his run on the Doom Patrol. His first title for the Vertigo imprint was actually a direct spin-off to the Doom Patrol. It was called Flex Mentallo, Man of Muscle Mystery. Flex Mentallo is probably one of the most important comics that you will ever read. It's so much more important than V for Vendetta, Sandman, anything you've already heard of. Flex Mentallo is more important than that. Now, I'm not saying those other titles are bad, but in terms of being philosophically important, Flex Mentallo is above and beyond anything else in comics. We've seen nothing like it since, and we'll probably never see anything like it again. It's amazing, and I absolutely love this title as well. You should all go and read this as well. After this, Morrison was given the Justice League of America and rebranded it the JLA. He essentially saved the Justice League from the dead. You see, before this, they just weren't selling at all. They had dropped, they were probably going to be cancelled forever if something didn't save them very, very soon. And Grant Morrison saved the Justice League. But more importantly than that, Grant Morrison wrote something called The Invisibles. The Invisibles is everything you could ever want from a 90s comic and more. This comic combined politics, pop culture, subculture, conspiracy theories, magic, Aleister Crowley, chaos magic. If you can think of it, it was probably in the Invisibles somewhere. But the craziest thing of all was Grant Morrison actually says that a lot of the stuff that gave him inspiration for the Invisibles was actually given to him by aliens that abducted him when he was in Kathmandu. It is worth noting that later on he would go on to say that he wasn't actually abducted by aliens literally, but something had happened to him, and the only way he could explain it was that he was abducted by aliens. After this, he moved to Marvel for a little bit, and he wrote Marvel Boy, Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4, and took over the X-Men, which was a fantastic run on the X-Men. He actually saved this title from the dead like he had done to the Justice League. And alongside this, Grant Morrison wrote The Filth. Now, if you read The Filth, it's very, very clear that The Filth is the expression of the darkness in Grant Morrison's life that he wasn't actually dealing with. The Filth is amazing, it's a fantastic comic, but I never ever say to myself, oh, what a lovely day, I know, I'm going to read The Filth. But what I will say is, if you're like me and you're a hyper-creative person, you get incredibly depressed if you're not creating, but when you're too depressed, you simply can't create, read The Filth, because it will give you perspective, and it will give you something to focus your negative energy into, and will give you that boost to create once again. Then he also wrote the legendary All-Star Superman, which was out of continuity. Now, I've always loved Superboy and Supergirl, but when it comes to Superman, I've always been a bit like, I like you, but I also dislike you heavily. I just don't care. All-Star Superman changed that. This is the Superman I want to read. For me, All-Star Superman is the definitive Superman. And a lot of people do actually say you cannot call yourself a true Superman fan if you have not read All-Star Superman. Skipping forward to 2007, Grant Morrison wrote Final Crisis. Then in 2009, Grant Morrison wrote the first ever Batman and Robin series. That's right, before 2009, there had never been a Batman and Robin book. There had been Robin books, there had been Batman books. Batman had been in the Robin books, and Robin had been in the Batman books, but there was never a Batman and Robin book. What I love about Grant Morrison's run on Batman and Robin isn't just the fact that it was Dick Grayson as Batman and Damian as Robin. It was something much deeper about it. It genuinely feels like it was written by someone who actually lived in Gotham, who actually understood that this town is crazy and everyone should probably move, but no one does. Then the New 52 came about and Grant Morrison was put on Action Comics. And even though it was a relaunch, Action Comics with Grant Morrison on it was not newcomer friendly whatsoever. As I stated earlier in the video, in 2014, Multiversity was finally released after being initially conceived just after Final Crisis. And later on this year, we are expecting to see Wonder Woman Earth 1 from Grant Morrison, which sounds incredibly exciting. Apparently, to research this comic, he had to read the entire history of feminism, so I'm really looking forward to it.
It's super effective!
Okay guys, that is it for today. So what do you think of Grant Morrison? Please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history videos. And also don't forget to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, support the show by checking out my Patreon so I can make bigger and better and more history videos. And also don't forget to subscribe to my gaming channel. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.